I didn't see you there. You might be wondering, hey,
why did an Evalt video take so long to make?
it's because I moved from Pennsylvania to North Dakota. With my wife Liz, of course. Yeah, I haven't even unpacked yet. I don't even know where my interface is, which is why I'm recording this section on my webcam mic. So I'm gonna go unpack and then set up the studio. And I don't even know what I'm talking about in this video. I haven't even planned that far yet. It's been a long 4 days on the road, man. I'm tired, I'm hungry, but my mustache is clean. All right, this intro is long enough, so I'm gonna get unpacked here and then let's talk about some video games. All right, everybody, it's been a while since I've had a video on this channel for, it's been a bit, but like I said, I moved to a new state. My beard is back, so there's that. And sorry, the set's not perfect just yet. We're still adjusting quite a bit, but here we are. But I wanted to come back with a new video because the more I think about it, the more I transition into new moves and new responsibilities in life. It's just kind of weird that I'm getting less interested in video games. And I still love video games. I still love talking about video games. But the more and more I change in my life, the more seasons pass, the less interest that I had back in high school or college or even 5 years ago. I'm not going to tell you my age, 30. But, I wanted to talk a little bit about that and just have a little conversation about 3 different reasons what you might be going through. You might have clicked on this video saying that, yeah, I'm not interested in video games anymore, and I want somebody who can relate to that. So I want to go through 3 different reasons that I have, but before I get started, what's up? How you doing? Do you like conversational videos? Do you like video essays? Do you like just discussing video games? Well, that's cool because you're in the right spot because, we're Evalt. We like to talk about different things and, I guess different things. But, if you're into all that stuff, click the subscribe button and hit that notification bell so that you know when all these videos come out. We don't really have a schedule here on Evalt, but you'll know because you hit the notification bell. So that's great and all. But with all that said and done, I just want to go through the first reason, which is it's a pretty obvious one. If you say so, if I say so myself, that's a phrase. So let's, without further ado, let's just get into it. Let's talk about some growing responsibilities in life. It's really weird to think about how back in the day, back in high school and college, or even elementary school, middle school, whatever, it feels like we spent a lot of time in classes, almost as much time as we do in our full-time jobs right now. Why is that? Like, why do we feel like we have less time to play video games, even though we spent close to 40 hours in classes, and sometimes we played sports after school, sometimes we had extracurricular activities.
Extracurricular.
I can't even say
Curricular.
Wow. But why do we feel like that? It's really because we have growing responsibilities. And really, if you really think about it, high school, college, whatever you want to put in there, elementary school, university, if you're not from America, whatever, it's almost like a pseudo life, honestly. Sure, you had chores when you got home, you had homework, fine, sure, whatever. But the stakes that you had going with chores, homework, the stakes involved weren't actually that, let's be honest here, they weren't that dire. If you missed some classes, if you slept through class, I mean, really, what's the biggest deal that's going to happen? Oh no, your grade went from an A to a C.
Oh no, it's the end of the universe. Oh no.
If you miss some homework assignments, right? It's like you miss a couple. What's really gonna happen to you? Nothing really that devastating is gonna happen to you. I feel like that's why we had more time for video games, because the responsibilities that we had in the pseudo life that we had in high school and college, they weren't as dire as they are now. Right now, like I said, I'm 30, I'm married, I have a pooch, I have a little dog baby, and I have other things to, be responsible for. If I don't go to my job enough times, I'm getting fired.
You're fired.
That's straight up facts. If I sleep through work,
You're fired.
I am going to get fired. Wow. And that's less money to be responsible for. That is less money to go to my family. And that's pretty dire. And so then responsibilities start to ramp up here. Just like I said, in high school, college, you know, the responsibilities weren't that dire if you had an average life. Let's be frank here. And even more so in high school, college, we had winter breaks, we had summer breaks, we had, you know, holidays sometimes. You know, we had these long breaks. But once you reach adulthood, that 40-hour work week, you're not getting a summer break. You're not getting 3 months off. Average. If you do have a job that has 3 months off, paid, wow, good for you. That's great. But average wise, you know, we don't have those breaks. We have so much less time in our hands, and now we have more responsibility. And I feel like as we grow older and more things get piled onto us, you know, financial burdens and rents, and, you know, once kids get into the picture, you have more responsibility with less time off. And now you've got this balance as, you know, an adult, you know, into the real world. Whoa. Now you really have to balance. Now you really have to plan out the 168 hours that you have in your week. And in high school, sure, you had classes, but really, you didn't really need that much sleep. You could stay up all night and then go to class and just sleep it off. It doesn't matter. But in the workforce, you really have to plan it out between that 168 hours in the week, you know, minus that 40-hour job, and hopefully you get at least 6 hours of sleep a night. Hopefully, but that really only leaves you with about 70 hours a week to, you know, play video games. But like I said, you got a lot of financial burdens. You got financial planning. You got to buy groceries. You got to cook. You got to have time for friends and family. You got to have time for all these different responsibilities that you're trying to juggle in your life. That 70 hours soon turns out to be like maybe an hour or two a night to game. And like I said, the more and more you grow, the more responsibilities are just piled onto you. So you have less time. And I think that's why you're less interested in video games, because you don't have time to care about video games. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. You're just in a season of your life where you have to balance all of these different things, and you don't have that time. It doesn't mean that video games are less important to you. It's just that you're in a season of life where you need to manage your time. You need to balance different things. You need to juggle a few things. And maybe sometime in the future, you can get back into video games. It doesn't mean that you're gone from video games forever. It's just that life is new. Life is hard. You're in a season of life, and that's fine. You know, it's not the worst thing to take away video games just for a little bit, just to get some time management. And that's a good thing. You know, just take some time for yourself. But that's why I personally like to go for video games that are about 10 to 20 hours long max, because I don't have time for Persona 5. I'm sorry, I don't have time for 200 hours of a JRPG. As much as I want to, I don't have that kind of time. I like those games that are short stories that I can just enjoy with the short amount of time that I do have between, you know, my job, you know, my wife, you know, filming these kinds of videos. I like these short kinds of stories that I can really take in and really enjoy on my time off, I guess you can say. But that's enough about time management. But that is a reason why a lot of people step away from video games. That's a lot of reasons why people, as they grow up, they don't grow out of video games. They don't grow up. It's just that time gets more constraining the older you get. And that's just it. But that brings me to reason number 2. That brings me to, oh, sure, time isn't really an issue for you. But there is another issue for you. Times change and eras change. Which brings me to reason number 2. So again, like I said, maybe, just maybe, you're the master of time management. Wow, good for you. Your 168 hours per week turn into, I don't know, 1,080. whatever. I don't know. You're the master of time management is what I'm saying. And you got all the money in the world to spend on new releases, new consoles. If scalpers didn't really take it from you. I didn't get the Halo Infinite Xbox Series X, but that's for another video. But let's say you can afford all these new releases. Here's an issue. You're not into any of the new releases at all. Because let's put it this way, like I said before, the times do change and eras do change. More specifically, the markets change. And maybe the market isn't really tailored to your tastes anymore. Let's say this, maybe you're not into multiplayers or battle royale games. A lot of games are coming out as multiplayer, battle royale, multiplayer. Sure, why not? Not every game is a multiplayer game though. So let's move on. Maybe you're not really into RPGs. There's a lot of RPGs that are coming out, especially in the coming years, because a lot of games are getting those RPG elements, getting more bang for your buck, more hours, more money, blah, blah, blah. You're not into that. Maybe you're a lot like me and you're not into survival games. I cannot stand survival games. I got very mad when Fallout 76 was a survival game, essentially. I don't like that. I don't like feeding or making, my player thirsty. I don't know. I don't like survival games. That's just me. And a lot of games are coming out as survival games, RPGs, multiplayer, or even, let's say, the story games. You're not into these new stories at all. You're not really vibing with them. But that's okay. These games aren't made for you. They're made for a new market. They're made for a new era. They're made for new gamers. But where does that leave you as the 30-year-old, like yourself, looking back into this camera like it's a mirror? Where does that leave you? Retro gaming. Honestly, retro gaming. And a lot of people will just think that well, to be a gamer, I need to be into all the new releases, and I need to be looking at the future, and I need to be excited about all the new games. But I feel like a lot of people think that as the years go on and as you beat them, retro games kind of cease to exist. They just do not exist in this sphere anymore. But that's not the case. Retro games are just everywhere. And it seems like, at least from my personal experience, it seems like a lot of retro game stores are just popping up all across the country. There's a passion for games of the past. We're talking, 360 and PS3 era back. And at least that's what I consider retro games. That's sad to think about that the 360 era was retro. But here we are. But that's just it, is that those games did not cease to exist, and you can still play them. You can replay whatever game that brought joy to your life back in the day, or now that you have money in your pocket and, now that you can afford the games that you've never experienced in your life, that's just it. You can actually experience all the games that you never got to experience as a kid, because now you have the money. And like we said before, let's say you have time management. Now you have the time to do it. And as an adult, you can indulge into retro gaming. And I think it's important even to look back into the past of gaming and to appreciate it and to actually restore retro games and to actually look at them as historical pieces, as nerdy as that might sound. As I discussed in reason number 1, as we grow older and more responsibilities go on to us, we have such a limited time to enjoy video games. Why aren't we just going after the video games that bring us the most amount of joy? I mean, for me personally, I've been going crazy over Skate 3. I've been just playing Skate 3 over and over and over again. It's pretty much my mainstay for video games right now. I've been just playing Skate 3. And some people, just playing one game for the time that you have, if it's an old retro game, fine, do it. Bring joy into the limited time that you have. Don't force yourself into liking a new game that released. Or, like I said before, replay a game over and over and over again until you get tired of it. Or you never will. Can I be real with you for a second? Do you know how many times I've replayed Halo 2? Halo 2 on the Xbox. Do you know how many times I've replayed that? A shameful amount of times. A shameful amount. When I say a shameful amount of times, I use lines from Halo 2 to hit on my wife. A lot.
Oh, I know what the ladies like.
It's stupid. It's a true story, though. But that's my point, is to actually go back into the games that you loved or go back into the games that you never experienced. I have never experienced Dante's Inferno. And guess what? It's on Game Pass. I can play it right now. That's a game that I've never experienced. And I can go back into retro gaming even further than the 360 era. Burp gang. And just experience all the games that I never got to play. So that doesn't mean that you're not into video games anymore just because you're not into new releases. It just means that you're appreciating the past of video games. And that's not a bad thing. Use the limited time that you have to play the video games that you actually like, whether it's old, new, or somewhere in the middle. The present, sure, but just play a game that you actually enjoy with the limited time that you have. And that's important to do. So finally, let's bring it into reason number 3. Let's say you are the master of time management. Let's say you're already appreciating retro games. But let's say you don't like retro games so much and you want to be excited about the future. But there's one more recent problem that I've seen on the internets that kind of steer people away from video games and the industry in of itself. So let's finish off with reason number 3. So there are a lot of serious cases coming out in the video game industry. And like I said before, let's say you got a lot of time in your hands, you're past the age of 25, you got some money, you love new releases, you're excited about every game that's ever announced. Let's say you're part of this group. That's fine. But let's say you're also within that group and you have some moral obligations on your hands. And what I'm talking about is the recent allegations, the recent proof of those allegations, and the recent boycotts of certain companies within the video game industry. I've talked about this a lot on our other channel, Games and Groceries. It's a video game podcast. It's a Games and Groceries podcast. Or even in the last video we did on this channel about boycotting the industry, there's a lot of companies coming out that we're starting to see the real light shown on these companies, such as Ubisoft with sexual harassment charges, or even with Blizzard Activision, or Activision Blizzard, or however you want to say it, with the discrimination of women and people of color, or even Riot Games back in the day, another sexual abuse and discrimination. Or even there were some game developers or CEOs of companies that came out with certain alignments towards political agendas that not a lot of people agreed with, but that's neither here nor there. Whether I agree or disagree, I don't really care. Go Green Party. But my point is that a lot of these companies are coming out with some really devastating, some heavy hitting allegations and proven and talking with other developers and people that work there. And all these different things are coming out. And you're starting to say that I don't want to put my money into a company that abuses these people. And even more so, somewhat on the same level of this is the mandatory crunch time that developers have to go through, that they have these divides with their families and their friends because they have to work 100-hour work weeks because their CEOs and their main developers don't have a good time management schedule, and they force these developers into working into these enormous hours that nobody asked for and nobody signed up for and nobody wants. And do video games really need that much crunch? Can we just allow video games to be delayed? Well, we the gamers can, but investors, business, why don't you? But that's just it, is that these people are not treated as, what's the word I'm looking for? Oh, yeah, like people. But that's just it, is that we're starting to realize that we've been funding companies into abusing people for their talents, their art. And sure, you can go into the argument of, well, I like to separate the art from the artist, or even the CEOs from the developers. That's a hard line to cross there because, the CEOs, the presidents of these companies, are really the ones voicing out their, let's say it, stupid moralities. I'll just go about and say that. And can we really separate the CEOs, the presidents of these companies, and separate that from the developers that have worked very hard in this game and are very passionate about the game? It's kind of hard to differentiate, and you kind of get stuck between a rock and a hard place of trying to be a good moral standing person and also going into the thing that you love and adore, which is video games. I love, and if you haven't watched The Good Place before, I highly recommend it. But this is a lot what The Good Place was talking about with morality and ethics and trying to be a good person on Earth. But it's so hard because every single thing that you purchase within this capitalist society, it starts to fund into something that's not something you quite agree with on a moral standpoint. And so hard to have ethics in this world while also trying to enjoy the things that you love. Which brings me into the video game industry. Like I said before, you really do want to enjoy video games. You really want to still be passionate as much as you were in high school. But it just seems so overwhelming of how many cases are coming out and how many companies are coming out to say that, it's a shame. It's just a shame of how many of these companies have had this life for decades and nobody has said something before. And now we're coming out. And even indie studios that we thought we could trust, you kind of have your hand in something that you don't really want to fund. And I would totally understand. I think everybody should understand that, saying hey, I'm going to step away from video games for a while just because I don't want to be putting my money into anything that is leading to sexual abuse or discrimination of people of color or even, crunch hours. I don't want to put my hard-earned money into funding something that leads to that. And that's why I think that a lot of people are starting to kind of step away from video games, not just with time management, not just with new releases, but you start to think about what other companies are doing this right under our noses. And it's kind of hard to think about that, but it's exactly the thing we have to think about. And I understand when people just say that I'm not going to be funding these video game companies, I'm just going to be going into a new hobby. And I would say that is your moral standing, and I think you should stand up for it, and I think you should talk to other people about that. And like I said before, I am boycotting Ubisoft. I am for sure boycotting Activision Blizzard. I like Call of Duty. I don't like sexual harassment. That's a thing that I don't enjoy happening. But that's it, is that I'm not purchasing games from this company. And that's just where it stands. So yeah, it does get emotionally draining for a while. And for some people, it might seem weird to say, oh, why is it emotionally draining not to play video games? Why is it emotionally draining to you to not fund video games or not to get video games anymore? It can be emotionally draining for some people because for a lot of people, video games are therapeutic. Video games meant a lot to their life. For me, when I was going to my dad's house, and me and my dad didn't have the best relationship, let's put it that way, video games were there for me. Video games were a great distraction for me. And, I applaud developers for giving me that kind of outlet to get away from a bad relationship. Let's end it there. But for a lot of people, video games were emotionally therapeutic for them. And that's why it can be emotionally draining for some people, because the one thing that you were using as therapy or something that was therapeutic or something that was helping you through a hard time, the very medium that was getting through hard times is giving people hard times. And that's kind of a weird balance, that it gave you a lot of hope in a hard time, and now you're funding into something that is distressing people. So that can be emotionally draining for some people, and just say, hey, I'm just going to step away from video games because this is really emotionally heavy for me. And I don't blame them. And that's why I'm just saying that you're not interested in video games anymore. And that's fine. But those are just 3 reasons why I think that you might not be interested in video games anymore. But there's other reasons out there. And, before I go into my closing thoughts here, I want you to type your thoughts in the comments down below. What are some other reasons that I missed that you might not be interested in video games anymore? I talked about time management. I talked about that you're not, into new releases. The the boycotts that are going on in the video game industry. You may not be into video games anymore, but what are some other reasons? Type your answers in the comments down below. I want to read them all. But that brings me to my closing thoughts. Let's end this video. So yeah, you're taking a step away from video games, and that can be emotionally distressing for you. And you might be thinking that, what does this all mean for me? Am I growing out of video games? Is this not a thing for me anymore? But let me go off script for just a second here. Just because you're taking away video games now doesn't mean that video games are gone forever. Just because you turn 30 or 50 or whatever age, it doesn't mean that video games cease from your life or cease from your heart. It just means one thing. You're in a season of life. And that's important to know, is that every season of life comes and goes. Sometimes you drop video games, sometimes you go back into video games, sometimes you drop another passion and pick up another passion. Sometimes you are just, let's just say it now, sometimes you're going through a depression season and you can't pick up anything anymore. It doesn't mean that video games are gone forever from your life. It just means that you need to accept that you're in this current season of life. And that doesn't mean the end of the world for you. It just means change is here. And that doesn't mean that you're not yourself anymore. If I can just quote one lyric from Dayglow, who actually picked this up from another poet from a poetry book. So it's not really his, but it is in his. Anyways, but he talks about how every year has its December. And thinking about that, saying that every year has its cold months, its end of the time, and its end of the era. Every year has its December. And just because you're not feeling yourself doesn't mean that it's going to last forever. That December is going to go into January, a whole new era. And that's just it. Picture that season of life. It's not here forever. Just be in the moment. Video games will be there, or video games will never come back. I don't know. I'm rambling at this point, but I just wanted to close with that thought. A season of life. That's all you're in right now. But I do hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. I hope, it was somewhat relatable to you. I guess. I don't know. Like I said in the intro, I just moved to North Dakota. That was a long move for me, so I haven't been playing as many video games. I haven't been filming as many videos. It's a season of my life right now, so I'm in a moment for it. But production's coming back. I'm going to set up the studio a little bit better to make more of these videos. Hopefully get back into podcasting again, but here we are in this moment. So again, thanks for watching this video. If you liked it, hit that like button and, give it a share to somebody who needs this. I don't know. And don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so that you know when all these videos come out. And with all that said and done, keep striving out there. Keep your head up high. You're in a season. That's all there is to it. And I'll see you in the next one. Take care.